I hold on to that night the way you hold a secret. I was 8, hidden in the back seat of our beat-up car, hugging my old teddy bear. The road slid by under a dark sky, sliced with orange flashes from the streetlights. I felt safe. We were headed to Grandma Eleanor's house, the place where everything always turned out okay. She'd welcome me with a warm hug, the smell of cookies in the air, and stories that made the whole living room fit inside my imagination. She even let me mess with her old books, a privilege that was mine alone. But that night, the script changed. When the car stopped on the gravel lane, I waited for Mom's tired smile, maybe a hand through my hair. Instead, she gripped the steering wheel so hard her knuckles went white. Her face was blank. Dad, stiff beside her, stared into nothing like he'd forgotten I existed. Silence swallowed everything. It was there, between the crunch of the tires and the wood of the porch, that I realized something on the other side of that door was about to shatter the world I knew. And even without understanding, I couldn't turn back. The engine was still rattling when Mom leaned toward me. She spoke so softly I had to inch closer to catch every word. "Allison, we're going to need some time. Stay with Grandma, okay? Be a good girl." That was it. No reason, no promise to come back, no goodbye hug. I nodded, because that's what she expected. I still thought she'd be back the next day. I got out with a backpack thrown together in a rush, clothes half folded. Grandma was already on the doorstep waiting, wet eyes, open arms. I turned, hoping for one last wave, but the car was already pulling away. I took 2 steps, as if I could still reach them, and it disappeared around the corner. I didn't cry. Not yet. I didn't understand. I only knew I'd been left. Grandma didn't ask anything. She just wrapped me in a tight hug, the kind that says without words, "It's going to be okay." Inside, the smell of chamomile mixed with something sweet in the oven, but I couldn't taste a thing. She made my favorite chicken noodle soup with homemade pasta and soft rolls. I stared at the bowl, spoon still. Silence filled every corner of the kitchen. Even so, in that silence, Grandma's hand on my shoulder offered something I hadn't found in the back seat of the car: staying. Grandma's voice drifted through the bedroom as she read, again, the adventure of the little fox who gets lost in the forest and finds shelter in unknown hands. It was the story I always asked for, but that night, the sentences fell apart before they reached me. On the screen of my memory, I kept replaying the image of my parents' car turning the corner and vanishing. I burrowed under the comforter that usually knocked me out in an instant. The sheets smelled the same. My teddy bear was still tucked under my arm, but the silence carried a weight I'd never felt. I lay still, eyes fixed on the window, waiting for 2 beams of light to cut through the curtains. Nothing, just the wind rustling the leaves, as if it were looking too. When morning broke, I sat on the edge of the bed and went back to watching the road. One car, then another. Every engine that pulled away tore off a piece of hope. "They're just running late," I repeated, first out loud, then only inside. Hours turned into a day, days into a week, and the phone stayed silent. Grandma never spoke badly of them. She just offered me the same coffee with milk, and a smile that, day after day, seemed harder to summon. I saw the tiredness in her eyes, but pretended not to. Until one night I realized it no longer made sense to ask when they'd come back. The answer was already there, only the courage to accept it was missing. They weren't coming back. Getting that into my head was quick. Getting it into my heart was slow. It still is. And while the little fox finds a home in the pages Grandma keeps reading, I keep hoping that someday I'll find mine outside them. I was the shadow at the back of the room, the student who nodded with a tight smile when the topic was family, but swallowed my words before they slipped out. Whenever someone asked about my parents, I shrugged and changed the subject, praying no one noticed the shake in my voice. One day, my teacher asked Grandma in for a chat. I peeked through the window and saw her climbing the steps, firm strides, serious face. Still, when our eyes met, she gave that calm smile that seemed to say, "I'm here." There was no lecture. That night at home, she made hot chocolate, sat with me by the fireplace, and stayed quiet. It was all I needed. presence, not questions. On days when the world echoed too loudly, she'd sit on the edge of my bed, trace light circles on my back, and murmur, "It's not your fault, Allison. Some people just aren't ready to be a mom or dad, and that says nothing about you." I wanted to believe her. I tried with everything I had. Even so, doubt came back like the tide. Why didn't they choose me? What was wrong with me? Grandma never hurried to answer. She just stayed. And I learned that sometimes staying is the loudest thing love can do, even when it's done in silence. Every night, the porch light clicked on before the sun had even set. It was Grandma's way of saying, without words, that the door was still open for anyone who needed a way back. She wasn't a fairy tale grandma. She didn't embroider pillows or hand out hugs every minute. Her care came in the hot food waiting in the pot, the newspaper read aloud when I had questions, the step-by-step on how to fold a t-shirt so it never wrinkled. The house was small, marked by time, but it fit completely inside me. The floor creaked with every step, the table showed faded rings from old glasses, and still everything felt solid, steady. Out back, an old Toyota coughed on cold mornings. She could have bought another car, but she didn't see the point. She'd rather invest in books. The shelves, floor to ceiling, hid novels, biographies, and a thick stack of finance notebooks she devoured before the coffee cooled. Once I dared to ask why waste time on those boring numbers. She looked over her glasses and said, "Knowing how to handle money, Allison, is having freedom. And freedom is something you never hand over to anyone." At the time, the words bounced off me. Later, they stuck. Every allowance logged in a notebook, every bill paid first so it doesn't snowball, every shopping list planned with me beside her, it was all part of a quiet training. She wasn't just teaching me to pay bills, she was training me to walk without crutches. The years turned like pages. The porch light stayed on, but I was the one who changed. I understood that her love didn't live in what could be seen, but in what couldn't be taken away. And that, I learned early, is worth more than any jewel that sparkles under the porch light. No birthday card, no phone calls. For years I pictured my parents crossing the street at dawn, looking through the window, searching for a way to come back. They never did. When I turned 16, I stopped waiting. The life Grandma and I built fit entirely inside the house. In summer, she taught me to plant tomatoes. In winter, she showed me how to seal the windows before the first cold wind. My first job, half shifts at the town bookstore, earned me congratulations, served with cinnamon tea and eyes that shone. She kept saying, "It's not the loudest person who ends up strongest." I turned that advice inside out until it became my compass. School got better. I made friends who stayed. After classes, I helped the little kids with homework. Life wasn't perfect, but it was mine. Sometimes I caught myself wondering, if my parents showed up, what would I say? Would I yell? Cry? Walk away? I never found an answer. And every time the doubt returned, Grandma's quiet presence reminded me, nothing essential was missing. With her, I had more than many people get in a whole lifetime. She filled the spaces of mother, father, and best friend all in one. When it was time to pick a college, I found out she'd been saving money for years without making a fuss. It was that kind of love, steady, no fanfare, that kept me going. I got into my dream college on a full scholarship. She cried softly, shaking with joy, cupped my face, and said, "I always knew you'd go further. I promised I'd live up to every word. I studied late, called every Sunday, came home on every break. Only in my senior year did her health. It started with little slips. The key left in the door, the kettle left on the stove. But how fast it all got worse blindsided me. Between finals and hospital runs, I forced myself to stay strong for both of us. Watching the one who'd always been my rock turn fragile cracked something inside me. Still, every time I walked into the room, she lifted her head and smiled. She held my hand and whispered, "Don't stop moving forward, Allison. That's how love keeps walking." Those words stuck. When she passed, it felt like half of me was torn away, but I also knew everything I needed was already with me. What no one expected was what came next. The funeral was held under a heavy sky, clouds swirling like a warning. I held a white lily in trembling fingers, facing a silence no prayer could fill. The hall filled up, neighbors, former students, friends from different eras. Every story they told showed sides of her I'd never seen, like she kept growing even after she left. That's when I saw them, standing near the door, my parents. Years apart had changed their faces. My mom's hair had lost its shine. My dad, thinner, looked tired. They didn't wave. They just stood there like they expected reserved seats in the front row. In that moment, I knew the goodbye wasn't the end. She'd kept a secret, something that could drag old ghosts back into my life. When the coffin closed, the emptiness turned into something else, a certainty that before the mourning ended, I'd find out why everyone was really there, and what my grandma wanted to leave in my hands. I saw them the second I stepped into the chapel. Years of silence don't vanish with a handshake, but there they were, leaning against the wall like distracted visitors. I pretended not to notice. The priest started, and I forced myself to listen, but every word fought against my pounding heart. Why show up now? The service ended, and Grandma's friends lined up to say goodbye. My parents stayed back, clutching coats they didn't need. When everyone else had gone, my dad finally came up. A quick nod, low voice. My condolences. He felt more like a stranger than the man who'd shut the door behind him years ago. My mom, silent, scanned the room like she was searching shelves in an empty store. Right then it was clear. They hadn't come for her. They'd come for whatever might be left. Days later, I sat in the lawyer's worn armchair. Tall shelves, smell of old paper. I expected a handful of keepsakes, the simple house, maybe some savings. He opened the folder, adjusted his glasses, and said straight out, "Your grandmother left everything to you. House, land, investments. Today they're worth a little over $50 million. The world froze. I choked on the number, sure I'd heard wrong. He confirmed, listing funds, buildings, stocks bought before they ever hit headlines. She managed it all herself, he said, as calmly as if talking about the weather. I signed each page with shaking hands. In my mind, I saw Grandma mending curtains, clipping coupons, smiling because being together was enough. As the pen cut the last line, I realized the biggest inheritance wasn't money. It was the quiet lesson of living simply, even when the world measures people by what's in their bank accounts. A knock on the door sliced through the office's silence. Right on time, they knew the exact hour. They walked in like they owned the place. My dad settled into a chair, face trained to look anguished. My mom zeroed in on the pile of papers on the lawyer's desk. "We're contesting the will," she announced, not looking at me. "She was our mother." The lawyer adjusted his glasses. "Mrs. Baker, your mother's instructions are crystal clear. Everything goes to Allison. There are no loopholes." My mom let out a short laugh. "She was influenced. She was sick." "She was lucid," he shot back. "Last year she recorded notarized videos. She made it clear none of you would get a cent." The hit landed hard. My dad lowered his eyes. My mom clenched her jaw. "This is absurd. We're her family." The room boiled, but I found my voice. "I'm family too." And I stayed. The words hung in the air, undeniable. They tried everything: legal twists, claims of undue influence, online smear campaigns. Useless. Grandma had anticipated every move, documenting decisions, filing every receipt. Out of ammo, they faced public embarrassment. In the weeks after, the story leaked. The granddaughter left by her parents, raised by a quiet yet brilliant woman who turned a simple life into a silent fortune. And then the whole country wanted to know, what would I do with a legacy no one could take from me? I gave no interviews, posed for no photos. Grandma had lived away from spotlights, and I'd protect her to the end. Meanwhile, my parents raced to TV. Sitting on talk show couches, they played victims, saying I'd poisoned Grandma's mind. Watching the act was infuriating. Strangers sent supportive messages, but I didn't need comfort. I'd already won the only fight that mattered. I grew up surrounded by love while they chased empty applause. Still, some nights I cried, not for them, but for the little girl who waited at the window hoping to be chosen. If I could, I'd go back and hug her, tell her that one day she'd see her luck. She had someone who truly loved her. With the $50 million inheritance, I made my first big move. I set up a scholarship in Grandma's name. It's for kids raised by grandparents, guardians, or adoptive families, kids who, like me, were left behind but didn't quit. Then I renovated the house. New pipes, fresh paint, but I kept the creaky floors and the blooming garden she loved. The shelves stayed put. I only added a reading nook where I can still feel her presence. The rest went into a trust. I hired real advisors and dove into the numbers like she taught me, not to pile up more, but to protect what she built and keep her legacy untouched. My parents keep calling, texting, showing up unannounced. I don't answer. There's no stage left for them, or for me. The story that matters is already written, tucked into every board that creaks under my feet. Years ago, they chose their own paths. Now it's my turn to choose mine. No bitterness, just the clear sense that chapter is finished. On an orange-tinted afternoon, I sat on the porch, hot tea in my hands, and murmured, "Grandma, I hope you're proud." The breeze rustled the leaves like it whispered, "Yes." That's when I knew that, for the first time in a long while, I was whole. The calendar turned and life found a calm rhythm. The old house, once quiet, gained fresh paint on the walls, the smell of sanded wood, and laughter echoing through the halls. Every month, the table filled with neighborhood kids, mostly those raised by grandparents or foster families. We shared food, board games, and dreams. In each of them, I saw a bit of myself, a guarded shyness, a stubborn push forward. Those gatherings stitched up wounds without naming them. Every so often, though, the past nudged the door. One afternoon, I found an envelope pinned to the gate. No stamp, no signature, just a shaky line. "Please talk to us." I didn't need to guess. My parents were circling town, showing up at events they knew I'd attend, lingering in aisles where I shopped. They wanted a conversation that no longer belonged to me. In the quiet, I'd found something they never offered: peace. On a night of light rain, I leafed through Grandma's diary once more. Between pages faded by time, a small envelope appeared, hidden in the back of the cover. It was hers, written a few months before she passed away. Inside, a final conversation awaited me, maybe questions, maybe answers. And it was in that moment, with the paper still sealed between my fingers, that I realized some stories only truly begin when we think they've already ended. Allison, if these words have reached you, it's because I'm already gone. Remember this: you were always my greatest joy. When the world seemed blind, I saw your strength. Don't let their return make you question yourself. You are enough. I pressed the letter to my chest and cried until the sky filled with stars. Between sobs, the memory of my parents returned, not as longing, but as stubborn shock. How could they vanish and years later expect the door to be wide open? My grandmother's voice echoed, "When people think no one's watching, they show what's in their hearts." I went looking for stories. Old neighbors remembered the day my mother called Grandma deadweight. They said my father folded his arms whenever her health failed. They didn't just abandon me, they left behind the one who had cared for all of us. Then I understood. Their return wasn't about remorse, it was a claim. They weren't after affection, but the money they thought they deserved. That truth took root. The next morning, I took another part of the inheritance to a center that supports elder caregivers. No signature, just intention. I pictured Grandma's reaction. A warm smile, maybe a tease about my soft heart, followed by the smell of pie in the oven and her usual line, "Now we're even." Giving felt like continuing her life, spreading love that, even now, can't fit inside just me. My parents faded from my daily life until they became distant silhouettes. Calls grew scarce, visits stopped. Later, I heard they'd moved to another state, maybe looking for peace, or just room to leave behind something they never really embraced. At the first autumn chill, I decided to fulfill the dream Grandma had laid out on paper. a tour of Europe's hidden libraries and old bookshops. She pictured herself in Trinity College's long room in Dublin, running her fingers over spines older than many nations. I carried a locket with her photo and a pressed lavender sprig from our garden. Walking down that stained glass-lit hall, I felt her presence, not as a memory, but as something the room itself acknowledged. I followed the thread of stories through Italian villages, coffee-stained bookstores in Paris, and Prague alleys where books breathe fine dust. There I found a yellowed poetry book with her favorite line handwritten on the flyleaf, "Hope is the thing with feathers." I closed the book, pressed it to my chest, and knew without a doubt she was still traveling with me, word for word. She would have smiled to see me carrying nothing but a backpack and a one-way ticket. Traveling alone wasn't an escape. It was my debut in the future she dreamed for me. Every train station, every unfamiliar street whispered the same invitation: live, discover, love. Months later, I came back with notebooks full of notes and sketches. The house was intact, as if it had held its breath while I was gone. I buried my hands in the soil, planted lavender in her honor, and that night sat there listening to the bees hum as the scent filled the air. Life, I realized, went on quietly. Before long, I met my own 13-year-old self again at the community center. Teenagers carried the same mix of fear and energy that had once defined me. One girl in particular, Mariah, stood out, shy but determined, bright yet quiet. We started studying for the entrance exams. Little by little, she admitted she wanted to write stories. I saw that light in her eyes, the same light Grandma saw in mine. When I offered her the scholarship set up in my family's name, Mariah cried. I hugged her and said, "You are not alone." In that moment, everything made sense. Grandma hadn't saved me with money. She saved me with time and presence. Now it was my turn. I don't see myself as a philanthropist etched on marble plaques. I prefer the ground, the conversation, the direct look. Money opens doors, but the real inheritance is connection. Every young person reached is a seed. That's how her legacy grows beyond my reach, spreading to places I may never step. She didn't leave me just resources. She left me a purpose. And purpose is the longest, most necessary journey anyone can take. I had just turned 30, then 35, and was still in the same house where everything started. Every anniversary of Grandma's passing, the garden became a meeting place, tea brewed from her recipes, stories passed hand to hand, poems whispered amid laughter and a few tears. The drawers held letters, diaries, grocery lists. They weren't keepsakes. They were foundations. One autumn evening, the sun slipped behind the oak she had planted, and everything clicked. Grandma didn't just rescue me from abandonment, she taught me to build a life so full of care there was no room left for loneliness. The wounds became a lens, and through that lens I saw purpose. Books I gifted, kids I mentored, seeds I planted. In every act, she remained. When I thought the past had finally settled, the mailman brought a stained envelope. The handwriting was shaky, my father's. I held the letter for long minutes before tearing the edge. "Allison, I don't expect forgiveness. I failed in every way a father can fail. Not a day goes by without regret. Your mother still blames the world. I now see. You didn't deserve what we did." That was it. No request for money, no rehearsed apology, just a truth cast out to sea. I closed my eyes. Anger, compassion, relief, all at once. I realized that story didn't end there, it just turned the page. And as I held the paper, I understood Grandma's legacy would keep guiding every decision, including what I'd do with that letter. I put the letter in the old wooden box where I keep Grandma's keepsakes. It wasn't forgiveness, it was memory. She always said the whole story deserves to be told, even when it's messy, especially then. I owed that to the girl who once called him Dad. Pretending he never mattered would betray the child who loved without reserve. Life went on. Mariah got into her dream college and sent me pictures of her first apartment. She posed proudly beside a thrift store typewriter. I pinned the photos to the fridge like report cards on a school door. Activity at the community center grew. With quiet funds from the estate, I set up a small editorial grant in Grandma's name for young authors who needed room to breathe. The house, now ringed by a field of lavender, became a waypoint. People smiled, pointed at the always open gate, admired the kids' drawings clipped to the porch. Sometimes I catch myself on the back steps, hearing in memory the kitchen humming, the smell of cinnamon, pots bubbling, and the constant feeling of being someone's priority. The pain didn't disappear, it just lost its sharp edges. Instead of ruling my days, it teaches me to treat others with patience, because even those who feel broken can bloom. There are mornings when sadness shows up unannounced, but even then I'm not alone. That was her real gift. Not the money, not the scholarship, but the certainty that whole memories, beautiful and messy, fit in the same heart. It wasn't the inheritance or the money. What truly remained was the certainty of having been loved so completely that strength would follow me even in the darkest moments. In the heat of a stifling summer, I decided to tell my own story. No publisher in mind, no applause sought. I just wanted to put on paper everything that had pulsed inside me. I named the project Lavender Bones. Bones, to remember what was broken. Trust, family, innocence. Lavender, to honor what Grandma planted where pain once lived. Every night I sat at the kitchen table by the window, hot tea steaming, old records spinning low. Each chapter unearthed a memory. The night I was left behind, the day I laughed again against all odds, the moment she taught me to dare to love again. When I finished, I printed a single copy and hid it in the corner of the little library she had built herself. It wasn't a book for the world. It was a dialogue just for us, a circle finally closing. There, I discovered something essential. I wasn't the girl who was abandoned. I was the woman my grandmother helped raise. And that changed everything. Years later, people still asked why I never sought revenge, why I didn't sue my parents, why I didn't expose them. The answer always fit in one sentence: I didn't need to. Their loss was already absolute. They lost who I became. They lost the late nights grading Mariah's essays, the mornings trimming roses for the market, the meals I cooked for lonely neighbors. They lost every sunrise over the lake, every child's laugh echoing through the house, every small victory that would have made Grandma's eyes shine. My answer, my revenge, is to keep living, living fully, generously, without a single shadow cast by those who left. It took me a while to realize forgiveness doesn't always invite someone back. Sometimes it just lets us drop weight that isn't ours. I didn't forgive them to absolve them. I forgave them to free myself from bitterness, anger, and the idea I didn't deserve love. They kept their choices. I kept mine. And my choices carried what she taught me: grace, steadiness, and a love that doesn't demand, only offers. On the 20th anniversary of Grandma's death, I returned to the oak she had planted. The tree, now huge and generous with shade, gathered dozens of faces beneath it. Young people I'd mentored who were now adults, neighbors leaning on canes with peaceful smiles, Mariah with her books and her own foundation, and many others whose paths had quietly crossed mine. We lit candles and traded memories, laughter mixed with tears. I was the last to speak. I told them about the woman who chose to save a girl nobody wanted, about the house that became a refuge, about lavender blooming where ruins once stood. When the sun dipped behind the hill and the candle flames flickered, I felt her there, not as a distant memory, but as a living legacy. When night opened above me, I lifted my face to the sky and whispered, "We did it." The wind brushed the treetops, and in the rustle of the leaves there seemed to be a reply. Yes, my girl, you did. There are dawns when everything grows still. The house is asleep, the wind moves slowly, and I stay at the window, tea warming my hands, listening to that living silence. I remember the girl I was, left behind, heart in shards, convinced she was alone. I send her a message through time. The wounds didn't win, the betrayals didn't break me. and the love that was missing came back, multiplied, in the most unlikely places. Then I close my eyes and feel Grandma's hands, strong from work, warm with care, kneading bread, stroking my face, shaping destinies. I'm grateful not just for the roof that sheltered us, but for the act of choosing me when no one else did. With her, I learned that home isn't walls or blood. It's loyalty, courage, and the will to rebuild even after everything falls apart. This house, this life, this story carry our voices mixed with the scent of lavender. When I fall asleep, I take Grandma with me in every breath, in every act of kindness, in every step taken with boldness. And out there, the stars keep listening.